And here we go. So this morning, I woke up and thought about this idea of surrender. And for a long time in my life, I lived my life from a place of surrender. And that's something that I don't think a lot of us think about. It was kind of normalized for me because I grew up in a very religious household where we were told that our life was not our own, that in fact, our life belonged to God, and that it was our obligation to love God with all our heart, all our mind, all our soul strength, and love our neighbors ourselves. And I took it seriously because I was a little kid and that was the information I was handed. So I took it in. But alongside that, as I've shared with some folks, my family also had folks who were not fundamentalist Christians. In fact, I had an uncle who goes by Roshi Katabu Turner, and he is a Zen practitioner and was spent some time in ashram and was Buddhist ish. And has like Buddhas and Jesuses in his house and in his Zendo. And if you look him up, Vernon Katabu Turner, he's written several books like Soul Sword, um, and Kiasana Zen, or something like that. I can't remember all the titles of the books he's written, but he's written plenty of books. In fact, all my mom's siblings have written books, and one of them is a scientist. Her sister was slash is a Muslim, and all of them had these ideas of surrender in the ethos that they practiced, but they articulated in different ways. And this is the context that I grew up in, emerged from. Meanwhile, being in the fundamentalist, very 700 clubbish household that I was living in with my grandmother, who used to tell me I was the only grandchild that she was going to see in heaven. A lot of pressure. At any rate, because of those exposures and this idea of surrender and of being part of something greater than ourselves, which was normalized in my context. And there was also this kind of interesting religious competition of who could surrender the best. I think there's a joke, I'm trying to remember it, but it's like there's like a Buddhist and they're trying to achieve nothing or no consciousness or something like that. And the person says, who do you think you are? Thinking you're more nothing than I am, or something to that effect. I can't remember. I'll have to look it up one of these days. But essentially, surrender has been a big part of my life. And one of the ways that it's articulated in the Christian scriptures that I practice, there's a couple of ways. One of them is where Jesus tells, according to the scriptures, Jesus tells his disciples that they should basically be like the wind, and that the wind blows and no one knows where it's coming from. And so is it with those who live by the Spirit. And so when you're living by the Spirit, which interestingly, the same word for spirit is the same word for wind, is the same word for breath. But when you're living that way, it's hard to point to where you're coming from and where you're going. You just know that you show up and then you're not there anymore, just like the wind. And that is how spiritual folks are supposed to live. And that's the way of surrender. And then later, Paul, he talks about how we basically become slaves to the ones that we surrender to, are the ones that we obey. And so if a person were to obey the law of what he calls sin or missing the mark, then that would be who we surrender to. That would be what we surrender to. And so that would be what leads us. Or if we surrender to the way of love or the way of righteousness, yada, yada, yada. The point is that I don't think surrender is something that we think a lot about in our society. And yet most of us have surrendered to something, whether we're conscious of it or not. So some of us surrender to money. We're like, well, what would make me the most money? And then if that's the preeminent thought in your consciousness, then you're going to do whatever it takes for you to get money. And that is going to guide you wherever you go. You're going to get pulled around, drug about like a carrot on a stick, pulling you here, there, because you're trying to get money. Some of us will be relationships. Some of us will be sex. Some of us will be drugs. Some of us will be so many different things that we will surrender to unconsciously. And I think that that is something that we have to start having conversations about. To what have you surrendered? Because the fact is that you probably have surrendered to something. Many of us in our current society, especially in America, we surrender to this illusory idea of what it means to be an American. One of the things I get frequently annoyed with when I hear any politician speak, whether they're on the left or the right, is they say the American people as if we're one monolithic type of whatever they think we are. And they'll say, well, the American people know this, or the American people know that. And I'm very curious about what American people they're talking about, or even if there is such a thing as American people, which I have a total other theory about that I won't get into right now. But this illusion to this kind of particular identity of what it means to be a certain type of person, sometimes from an egoic standpoint, we try to adhere to the idea of what the people in our group or our type are supposed to do. And that is also a type of surrender. And so I want to invite folks who end up listening to this to be really curious about what you surrender to, and really honest. Because chances are, if you're trying to pretend like you're not surrendering to something, I mean, you might not like this term, but generally speaking, then you are lying. You're lying because if things go in a direction that you don't want them to go and you get pulled because you have surrendered, and you basically get pulled in certain directions, and it's beyond your volition because you've already surrendered yourself to it. To be at choice is actually to be able to get still regardless of what's happening around you. And maybe you surrender to peace. And if you surrender to peace, then you are going to be able to make different kinds of decisions. And you might say, hey, I'm going to get still. I'm not going to get pulled left or right or whatever the case may be. And there's also scriptural references about people who are pulled about, they say, with every wind of doctrine, is what it says in the Christian scriptures. But many of us get pulled around, and we have to be mindful of what is pulling us around. And are we capable of being at choice? Are we capable of being around some kind of energy that disturbs us or makes us feel some kind of way, and then not react? Because if we can get ourselves to not react, then we're at choice. Then we can respond. And that means that we've surrendered to maybe a higher level of consciousness or higher awareness. And that too is a type of surrender. So the question is, what have you surrendered to? I, for the most part, am trying to commit myself and recommit myself to surrender to love. I want to be guided by love, and not that soft, sentimental love that only soft talks and tries to, as I mentioned in the previous post, tries to be a good person, which is something that doesn't exist, but that kind of love that expands and invites people in the greater possibilities of who they are and who others are. I try to live from an invitational presence that says, hey, I want you to have more of you through your relationship with me. I don't want to get into a relationship with someone, whether it's a relationship that lasts 1 minute or the rest of our lives. I don't want someone to be less by being around me. Hey, Rev Evelyn and T. Ree and Mark. Good afternoon. I don't want anyone to be less by being around me. I want people to be more of themselves. I want them to feel deeper into who they are. I want them to be able to expand into greater awarenesses and to see the beauty that's inherent in so much of life. And that's, again, is something that you can surrender to. You can surrender to beauty. But the point is to be conscious of that to which you surrender, to know what you're surrendering to. It's one of the things that grieves me sometimes is when I walk around and I see so many of us pretty much mentally gone. We're sadly, I can't speak for other folks. I can only speak for myself. But I've encountered so many people who they just say what they think they're supposed to say. They just do what they think they're supposed to do, and they have not given it any depth. And I can't remember which Greek philosopher said this. So, but one of them said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I think it was Plato. It's true. Many of us are going to live our entire lives programmed at an early age and maybe made very few shifts from the first time we woke up and someone told us who we're supposed to be till the day we die. And we miss out on this opportunity to really be present and really tap into our potential. And maybe we can't fulfill every potential, but we can fulfill some. And if we find ourselves stuck in this tension because we've surrendered to something unconsciously, maybe it's our parents, maybe it's our community, maybe it's our neighborhood. You can't be of service to anyone if all you are is an automaton that only can function in a certain way because someone told you to and you're afraid of showing up in any different way. That's not liberation. You can't liberate people if you're bound, right? You can't give anyone anything you don't have. So I try my best to work consistently to liberate aspects of myself that may be trapped from some teaching I got a long time ago, and to then share what I've learned, share my openings, share my awarenesses. And there's some things that I've had encounters with that I don't even know how to articulate 100%. So yeah, I haven't shared those yet, but I have the intentions of sharing them. But I'm surrendered more so than anything to love and awakening and invitation and healing. And I have to ask myself different questions when I'm making choices on what I say or what I don't say, what I publish and what I don't publish. Is that emerging from my surrender to a higher calling, to love, to joy, to peace, to well-being? If it isn't, then I don't need to put it out there because that's going to always come back to me. And if it is, even if it doesn't look like it, I have to ask myself, how is it? Like I have, for example, for those of you who follow some of my previous posts, I've been pretty critical of people that I consider to be fake Christians. And I call them fake. I don't call them fake Christians because to me, they're not Christians at all. I call them scredians, which is a word I made up, which I explained in a previous video of why I made that word up. Or I should say that word came to me in a dream, which is actually accurate. It came to me in a dream. For people who say that they follow Christ and they do the complete opposite. Everyone knows that they are liars. Even they know they're liars. When I used to be a fundamentalist Christian and I couldn't speak in tongues and everybody else in my church seemed to be able to speak in tongues. And when I got kicked out and some people said, well, you couldn't speak in tongues anyway. Later, some people told me that they were fake and speaking in tongues. And I was like, wow, man. So you just let me sit around there not being able to speak in tongues and feeling some kind of way because I couldn't do it. And you couldn't do it either. You were just faking, being like humana, humana, humana. That's not cool. But there's a lot of fake people out there who, for the best thing I can say about them is they just don't want to get excluded. And so they do what they feel like they have to do to belong. But that is not living a real life. That's not being truthful. And they cause harm by being fake. And so instead of calling them Christians, which they really aren't, and I think that many of the people that we see professing Christianity publicly, I mean, not to make this a whole Christian thing, they're not Christians because they don't do what Christians do. All right. I don't even know what Christians do, but they don't do what Christ is professed to have done. They don't. And if they don't do it, then it doesn't matter. Yes, we have the power of words to call something something that it isn't. That's called lying. And we can lie all day if we want to, but it doesn't make it true. And lying repeatedly, saying the same lie over and over and over again also doesn't make it true. Regardless of what some people try to do. So these people are surrendered to something when they lie like this. The invitation that I try to bring to the people that I engage is to, even if you have failed, even if you've been a liar, even if you've been fake, you can always stop, turn around, and live from a higher level of surrender. And so even myself, sometimes I'm surrendering at a high level. And then sometimes I let things get to me and they bring me down to what some people call like a lower vibration. And I'm not able to live up to my ideals, but am so committed to them that I'm able to sit with myself and say, okay, Pedro, this is what you wanted to do. This is what you did do. This didn't match. This is what you have to do to change it because your ideal is this. And so I don't talk to myself in third person. I'm just saying that for you guys. But basically, I correct myself. I subject myself to greater discipline and greater understanding, I study people who have practiced what I want to practice. Like right now, I just purchased a C.S. Lewis collection, the Essential C.S. Lewis, because I like the way he thinks. It's 38 hours of him expressing his views on Christian thought from a very logical perspective as someone who was a former atheist. I like that. I'm going to spend 38 hours listening to that because that is the kind of mindset that I want to be able to maintain. And I want to show up in the world with greater integrity. So I'm surrendering for a little bit of time with C.S. Lewis. I'm going to surrender for a minute and listen to what he has to offer. And then I'm going to surrender to some other people who have been able to live from that place. So that's the invitation. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to remind you that all of us are surrendering, whether we're conscious of it or not. It behooves you and everyone that you're encountering to be able to be mindful of that to which you surrender, and then look at the things that you actually want to surrender to and put time into those things. Invest energy into those things so that you can be in the world the way you imagine yourself to be interiorly. That's the gift. That's the opportunity. And so if you need any encouragement in that, I'm here for that. I'm writing toward that. If there are things that you think I can offer, whether it's courses or songs or something that might encourage you, let me know. I'm going to continue to be creating and sharing from this place because that's what I'm surrendered to. And so I'm surrendered to love, I'm surrendered to liberation, and I'm surrendered to living in a way that my insides match my outsides and vice versa. So I love you guys. Thank you for being up here and taking the time to listen. Please share. And if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. Not so much for me, but for you, because I can tell you honestly that everything I'm putting out here, I'm only putting it out here. I could just sit in a room by myself and think my own thoughts. I'm putting it out here because I do love y'all. I do care. And I do know that our greatest opportunities are right in front of us. And I just hope more and more of us receive it so we can live the world that we know is possible. Peace.